Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I not only continue my Vincent Price marathon, but the Corman Poe cycle as well. My last video was the first of the cycle, Fall of the House of Usher, and now the follow-up, Edgar Allan Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum, which is one of Poe's biggest stories and probably the biggest film of this cycle. Of course, I have it on this 2-pack with House of Usher. I also have it in a 3-pack with The Raven and Tales of Terror, which are also part of the Poe cycle. So this was released the following year in 1961 and was a fairly big success, and it was actually based on the success of this film that I just forgot the name of it. American International Pictures decided to create a series of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations with Roger Corman. Similar to House of Usher, it had widescreen cinematography by Floyd Crosby, which looks great. Set design, art direction by Daniel Haller, film score by Les Baxter, and but I would say, even with all that, Pitt is far superior than House. Now, House I still enjoyed very much. It captured more of the gothic aesthetic of Edgar Allan Poe. Now, when I say that, it might sound like it should be more akin to Frankenstein and Dracula, how those look. Not necessarily. While it does look and feel similar to House of Usher, there were certain things that this film did that I really think opened the film up. And really where I thought it shined. These are the flashback sequences that are shot at like an angle, and sometimes the film is like stretched or like elongated with red, yellow, blue filters. It makes it very dreamlike and odd. But I really enjoyed that. One little trick that Corman did was during the editing, during the climax with the pendulum, he took every other frame out, so it looked like it was going faster, which I guess that would have worked instead of just speeding up the video. I did kind of notice it looked kind of odd, but it worked. Now, of course, Pit and the Pendulum is one of Poe's more popular tales. My favorite they never did make. There was a film, I think from 1960. Actually, there's been a bunch of films, but the one I saw in school is The Telltale Heart, which is actually my favorite short story of all time. But, Pit and the Pendulum is I read it back in high school, long time ago, not as a part of this collection. I just got this recently, and I'm in love with it. But, of course, returning to the cast was the ever-loyal Vincent Price, actually in a dual role but you also have John Kerr, Luana Anders. This says Anthony Carbone, but in the opening credits it says Antony with no H. And one of the queens of the 1960s, Barbara Steele. I'm going to see what this says as far as Carbone's name. Okay, well, where the hell's the cast? Okay, this says Antony as well. Okay, so I guess it's on this. It's a typo. Which also, Anthony Carbone is the name of the guy that was in, the name of the character that was found in the frozen meat truck in Goodfellas during the Layla sequence. Great film. One of my favorite films. This film had a profound influence on not just Stephen King, but also Italian filmmakers like Mario Bava's The Whip in the Body, which I just got, Dario Argento's Deep Red. So this is one of the more influential, shocking, I guess, kind of horror films of the 60s. I loved it. I really did. But, so yeah, as far as the story goes, it takes place in 1547 in Spain. It did do a good job at creating that look. You know, they have, like, the Spanish, like, those round... I mentioned this in House of Usher, and I don't know why. I was actually thinking of this film. Those round, kind of ruffled collars. The costumes I thought looked great. I really liked the look of the castle. Interior and exterior. The establishing shots had great matte paintings. I love matte paintings. I love matte paintings as much as, like, stop motion. An Englishman named Francis Bernard, played by John Kerr. he goes to the castle looking for his sister, and he comes across his brother-in-law, Nicholas, played by Vincent Price, because she has died mysteriously. He doesn't know how or why. And her name's Elizabeth. She's the one played by Barbara Steele. And Nicholas and his sister, Catherine, played by Luana Anders. That's how I'm pronouncing it. They're kind of vague with him, and they just kind of walk him around the castle, sort of like House of Usher. Someone's going there looking for someone, and they just kind of trot him along a little bit. They tell him it was a rare blood disorder that 6 months ago. But, you know, they evade questions about the disorder, so he's quick to pick up on the bullshit. And, you know, that's when he says he's not leaving until he finds out what really happened. Anthony Carbone plays the family physician, Dr. Leon. And then they're having dinner. Francis asks about his sister again. And Dr. Leon tells him that she died of massive heart failure brought on literally by dying of fright. And then Francis demands to be shown where it happened. So they take him down to the castle's torture chamber, which I love the look of the torture chamber. And that's where Price, as Nicholas, reveals that she was under some sort of spell by the castle's atmosphere, became obsessed with torture chamber and its devices, and she became more and more unbalanced, not sleeping or eating or even speaking, often being found down there. And he went down one day and she was found in the she was found in the Iron Maiden, which I like that shot when it shows her, because it shows the Iron Maiden. Then the camera zooms in on like the little slit, and we see like her eyes popped open. And this is one of those flashbacks where it's, I believe this was like a blue filter. The colors in this film really pop off the screen. In fact, even the opening credits, we get like this sort of, kind of like how in oils and water, it gets like that wavy kind of look, and it's like red and yellow and blue. And the last thing she says before she dies is, Sebastian, which is Vincent Price's father's name, is also played by Vincent Price. So this is when Catherine explains to Francis kind of the history of their childhood, especially of Nicholas's, who, when he was young, he saw his father, Sebastian, who was part of the Spanish Inquisition. He saw his mother and his brother being killed because of their infidelity, screaming like adulterer and infidelity and stuff. So he witnessed this. But of course we find out later that the mother wasn't tortured to death. She was actually walled off in her tomb alive. And so now Nicholas has a fear that Elizabeth was buried prematurely, and becomes more and more paranoid and fearful that she's haunting the castle. We hear several screams throughout the film that people swear is her. It gets to the point where he demands that her tomb be opened, and we see a rotting corpse. And then, what exactly was that? Oh yeah, they found her in such a position that she died screaming after failing to claw her way out. So, I guess he was right. It causes Nicholas to faint. Then, of course, that night, Vincent Price does a great job at just really teetering on the fence of insanity. He hears Elizabeth calling him, and he follows her voice down to her tomb, where he sees Elizabeth rise from the coffin and pursue him through the torture chamber, where he falls down a flight of stairs. And then Elizabeth gloats over his unconscious body. And that's when she's met by Dr. Leon, who is not only her lover, but an accomplice to drive him insane, so that she could inherit his wealth and castle. It is then that Dr. Leon confirms that Nicholas is gone mad, his mind's destroyed by terror. And Elizabeth then begins to taunt him. Nicholas begins laughing hysterically. And this is when the film turns and he believes that he's now his father. And he reenacts the events that he saw as a child. Where he gags her and puts her back in the Iron Maiden. And then he gets Dr. Leon. And he falls to his death down in the pit while trying to escape. And then Francis hears Elizabeth screams, goes down. But he also confuses Francis for being his uncle. Knocks him unconscious, and he straps him to, the stone slab below the pendulum. Which, as pendulums do, every so many turns, it'll descend lower and lower. And Catherine arrives with one of the servants. There's a brief struggle, and Nicholas falls to his death in the pit. They get Francis out, and then Catherine vows that no one will ever enter the room again. And I liked this last shot, where after they vow that no one will ever go in there again, and we hear it lock shut, the camera then pans down, and we see that Elizabeth in the Iron Maiden is still alive. So in a way, she is still entombed, never to be saved again. So really, it did a good job with Poe's story. This must have been crazy for people to see back in 1961. I mean, it's not really bloody. It's definitely more stylized than anything, and the way it's stylized, I really love. Again, like with the flashbacks, the colored filters, but also just the stretched kind of slanty angles, and I loved all that. Loved the look of the torture chamber, and the set design with the torture devices. Also, it's one of the famous Vincent Price roles where he has it's like the black, it's like just his face, but like the black hood and everything. He did great in the dual role of Sebastian and Nicholas. I really like this film. Probably my favorite, definitely my favorite Roger Corman film. And so far, even the bits I've seen from the other Corman Poe films, it's probably going to be tough to beat this one. I thought this was an excellent movie. Hell, it's probably my favorite horror film from 1961. I really enjoyed The Pit and the Pendulum. Highly recommend it. It's up there as one of my favorite Vincent Price films, Vincent Price performances. Definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Vincent Price, horror films of that period, Gothic tales, Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, if you're a fan of any of that stuff, it has a little bit of everything. So, 1961, Roger Corman's The Pit and the Pendulum. Excellent movie. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.